Hi, and welcome to the Uplift with Dabney Brice, the podcast where we'll elevate global stories by shining a spotlight on underrepresented narratives, educating ourselves about current and historical events and diverse cultures and communities. Let's journey together to step outside our comfort zones, uplift each other, and make the world a little bit better along the way. Hey, my uplifters, it's your girl Dabney Brice, and I'm really excited about this episode because I have my new friend, Abby Muthoni, on, and she is honestly a force to be reckoned with. She is, I don't even know how to explain it. Kind of have to just listen to her, but she's amazing. We kind of get into a little bit of everything. We talk about how she was born in Kenya, but moved to the United States when she was really young, and how having those two perspectives really challenged her and made her appreciate her Blackness. We talk about race. We talk about, again, the division between African Americans and Africans, and where do other types of Blackness fit into that division as well. And then we also talk about a special project that she's done. I won't give you it too much away, but it's really amazing, and there's a link to that in the episode notes, so you'll definitely have to check that out after this conversation. But yeah, I'm just really excited to have her on. The conversation we had was just like, I don't know, amazing. She feels like a twin soul. I say this a lot in the episode. She feels like a twin soul, and so I can't wait for y'all to hear it and to listen to her brilliance and to her amazingness. So yeah, let's dive in and let's get started. Thank you, Abby, for coming on. This is the first time we're meeting. We have a mutual friend, and I've heard so many great things about you from her. Shout out to Casey. Casey's just connecting me to a lot of different people. She's just like, this person. I'm like, bet, give it all to me. So it's an honor to have you on and to meet you.
Yes, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that Casey connected me to you and like your podcast as well, because I feel like I've learned a lot, especially with like the recent one about maternal health. So I'm excited to do this.
Thanks. Excited to be here. All right. So just to start off, can you just introduce yourself and tell the audience about who you are and your background?
Okay. My name is Abigail Muthoni. I go by Abby a majority of the time. I'm 24. I live in Richmond, Virginia at the moment, but I grew up in Kenya. I moved to the US when I was younger. I graduated with a degree in journalism and women and gender and sexuality studies at the University of Richmond like 2 years ago. Feels like it's been forever. I feel like, is there anything else interesting about me? Oh, I have a cat and a dog. My dog's name is May, and my cat's name is Callie.
Oh, my birthday's in May, so like,
I love that.
love that name.
Yes.
That's amazing. They're so
Name
cute.
is actually spelled like MEI, though, but like I get it.
But like,
Yeah, we were trying to be like, I don't know, ethnically correct because she's half Shih Tzu. So like, we gave her like a Chinese name because, you know, our like blended family, she'll fit in perfectly.
that's amazing. I love that. I love that. You have to send me pictures of May and Callie, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I for sure will.
You'll have to send me pictures because I love dogs and cats. So you mentioned that you moved from Kenya to the United States when you were really young. How old were you, first of all? And do you sort of remember moving here and how that felt, since it's been a while?
Yeah, so I moved to the US when I was about 3.5. So I came here in 2000, and I came with a family friend, just because of like the way the whole immigration process worked out. I couldn't come with my family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my mom came here before me. So I've pretty much lived in Richmond ever since then. I think a majority of my memories are from being in America just because of how long I've been here. So I don't exactly remember too much from when I was in Kenya. I do have a lot of pictures, luckily, so those are really helpful. I feel like I remember feelings more than I do like specific memories, and then people like my guka or which is my great grandfather, and just like other family members that I spent a lot of time with when I was in Kenya.
Have you been able to go back since you've moved to either to just to see family?
Yes, I have been back. I truly wish I could be back a lot more. And I was like planning on going this year, but like, pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I haven't been back as much as I would like to, because I've just been so like concentrated on everything I've been doing in the US. And I think with my family just wanting to like build their family and bring in like other family members, that like we haven't done too much international traveling, a lot like other immigrant families or Kenyan families who go like every holiday.
I have not friends from Kenya, but like friends from Nigeria that would go pretty much every
Every
summer after like school ends and things like that. And like it's basically been halted because of the
Yes,
pandemic.
I,
So
I feel like I didn't get that like typical like African child experience where you get to spend every summer back at home. Um, but I know all about it and I wish.
maybe that's something in the future you can do.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking about doing it for like my children if I ever decide to have any. I think
Mm-hmm.
they enjoy it a lot and they could learn Swahili.
True, true. I feel you. My family's from Haiti, so I haven't been yet, but I would like to go. I was born here, but like I would like to go. My plan was to go after grad school, and then
Things happened.
yeah, I graduated last year, and the whole world shut down. So it was like, okay, I guess that'll happen when it happens.
I feel you on.
So I guess like based off of your experiences, so like you were born in Kenya, you started your early years there and then moved here, but I'm sure that you've experienced like the culture within your own home.
Mhm.
um like you said, mentioning your mom. So but like your whole like life has been living as a Black woman in America. So like what is that like being from Kenya but living as a Black woman in the United States?
I frankly feel like it's really complicated, and I think my own identity has like changed throughout the years,
Mm.
as I like grow and become more self-aware. And so like I think who I would have called, like how I would have identified like 15 years ago is different from how I identify now. um but yeah, I think that I'm in that like weird little section of like immigrants where I'm not first gen because I wasn't born in the US. But I also like didn't spend a lot of my formative years back at home. So like, do I really have a home? I don't know.
Mm.
um, so I think that just by not having that kind of like growing up experience in Kenya that a lot of my friends have or my family has, means I'm kind of disconnected from my family's like worldview and all the other Kenyans that I know. And I think I relate a lot more in terms of like everyday things with Americans. But I would say like my home life is very Kenyan. I my family is quite slow at doing American things. So I think sometimes being back home feels like being transported back to Kenya because it smells like home and like everything's so different. Um, but yeah, I think that I had a hard time when I was younger, like seeing myself as an American because I thought that erased my Kenyan identity.
Mm.
And that's an experience that I had a lot growing up, where like people would hear my voice and see me and then not think of me as Kenyan. Um, they think of me as African American, or I don't know, me being from somewhere else. And
Mhm.
that really frustrated me because especially when I was younger, like I had known so much of my life being in Kenya, and like this was such a different place that I like wasn't getting what people were talking about. But I think now, like in my 20s, I definitely see that it's a bit of both in my life, and there's no purpose in choosing whether I fully identify as like Kenyan or I fully identify as American, because I'm truthfully both. And I think like looking at my life with that lens is really helpful, because I'm not going to be the most Kenyan-esque person ever, but I'm also not really the most American-esque person. So I think it's been tricky being in that, like, I don't know, I think the like official term is like half generations, or like one and a half generation people.
Yeah.
So I've definitely found that when I've met other people like me, they have a similar experience to me, and that they have had a really hard time coming to understanding their self, because they don't have the ability to assign like super like simple labels to their life and the things that they do, because it truly doesn't fit. Like, I don't know, like going home to my family's for dinner is like I'll get to eat like ugali, and I'll get to eat skuma wiki and all of those things, and like I love them a lot. But like if you asked me what my favorite food is, I might be like, I don't know, a Caesar salad, or like
A hamburger.
yeah, like a hamburger or something like that. So yeah, I think my life is quite confusing, and I don't think I fully can understand it yet, but I think I'm the only person who could put it into words. So I think
Yeah.
I'm actively spending my years formulating what my identity was, like 10 years too late or something.
So like, given that you like talking about struggling through those different identities and perspectives too, what would, I guess, not necessarily asking you to claim one or the other, but like how have you been able to overcome that to where you're sort of accepting that you don't have to choose one or the other?
Yeah, I think that kind of came a little bit easier to me because I'm an Aquarius, and I am an Aquarius through and through. So like I don't like labels in the slightest. So I was originally like, oh, this sucks. But I think that like as I went through school and as I went through college, I was able to define words a lot more clearly, and see the ways in which people weren't using terms right, and definitions right. And so like, I don't know, I kind of realized that, I don't know, at some point in middle school, I would say that like a lot of people don't identify as their like home country or like where their family comes from. It's a lot more of like the states or a neighborhood or a city. And I've never thought of myself as being like a person from Richmond, Virginia, or like, I don't know, like a native from Richmond, which hate that term. I don't think any of us can be native on stolen land,
Nope.
unless you're actually native. But so I think I've just like really wrestled with it, and like I've like written it down and be like, which one most do I feel the most with? Do I have the most like vibes with? And like I'm really like none of them. It's all of them together. I think in being a Black woman and being a Kenyan woman, and also being an immigrant on top of that is a lot. But I think that like I'm happy with the words that I choose to identify myself with now. And I think that there's like always room to add more. And I think that I've been particular about it in recent years, just because I find that when people have different words that they've associated with me, they have so many assumptions that come along with that. And then it gets to be really annoying when like every conversation I have with them is like telling them that I don't fit into a stereotype of like whichever person that they think that I am. It's always frustrating because I feel like I'm fighting anti-Blackness, like xenophobia, all of that, depending on which word I use to describe myself when I meet other people. And then I think that like what's like brought all of this together is honestly like really coming into my Blackness and having an experience like, well, it wasn't just one experience, but the experience of like being proud of my Blackness, understanding what my Blackness means, and that like all of the words that I could use to identify myself fit in the bubble that is Blackness. So I think that like in the most simplest of terms, I really do see myself as a Black woman.
Snaps. I was like, mic drop. That was beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree. And I can sort of relate, not as someone that's been, I wasn't born in Haiti, I was born here, but sort of growing up with like the dichotomy of like being born and raised in America, but like home is basically Haiti. So like, how do I identify? I grew up being told, like, I also grew up in a mainly white suburban town, and sometimes being told like, oh, you're not Black, you're Haitian, or like you're not Black, like, you know what I'm saying, like Black and Haitian were two separate things. And I was just, it legit does not make any sense. And I would always be so confused. I'd be like, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. But like feeling like I was split between the two sometimes, and not feeling I was enough of one.
Yeah, it's, you feel like you're, weighing it and you're like,
Yeah.
I think I fit in, I check enough boxes off for this one.
Exactly. And like, I it wasn't until now that I feel like I could accept both sides of myself, the American and the Haitian side, and be like, you're going to get both. And like, yes, I know a lot about Haiti, but I don't necessarily speak the language. And like, that doesn't mean I'm any less Haitian. It's like,
Yes. Ugh, I hate hearing that from my family because they're like, you don't speak Swahili. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make me any less Kenyan. I'm not the American.
yeah, exactly. And like, I lost track of what I was going to say, but my family says the same thing too. But I understand Creole. And like, I'm like, well, obviously there's a connection. Like, I still have some sort of connection because I respond to you. I just respond to you in English. But like, I understood what you said.
Same. I understand that completely because since I was little, I was speaking 3 languages. So I was learning English. I knew Swahili, and I also knew my tribal language, Kikuyu. So like I knew all of those. And then I came to America, and my family was just so worried about me like not assimilating well, because I think I essentially like started like preschool the same year I came to the US, and then I started kindergarten and so forth. So they've spent a lot of time ensuring that I was speaking English and I was understanding English really well, even though they weren't. And then they were just speaking to me in Swahili. So I never got the opportunity to speak back in Swahili growing up. So it meant that I spoke back in English, and I've become really comfortable with that. But I'm also like really comfortable hearing Swahili. So it's a little annoying. Because like, for instance, whenever my boyfriend comes over to my family's house, they'll be like talking and they'll be going in and out of languages, but I like never notice it because to me it
sounds like one.
Exactly, they're speaking, and then my boyfriend will be like, I didn't understand the word they were saying, and then I have to ask him. I was like, what parts do they speak Swahili and in what parts were English? I couldn't tell you going back and like thinking about it. So it's definitely like frustrating not being able to speak the language that everyone else around you speaks, but I think like the both of us being able to understand makes us a little more clued in to when talking trash, especially.
Exactly. I was like, you can't talk trash to me. And even if I don't understand it fully, what you said, I know the intonations enough that I know that you're talking smack. Like, so sometimes my parents, they're going to kill me if I say this, but like family, family will be like, they'll say something smart and you're like, what you talking about? And they're like, oh, what did I say? I was like, it doesn't matter what you said. I know you're talking smart. Like,
yes. Or like people I know like to speak Kikuyu and Swahili at the same time and think that I don't know that they're doing that, but I don't really know the difference that well between Kikuyu and Swahili. So I still get them and they'll like talk trash about me and I'll be like mad and they'll be like, "What's wrong, Abby?" I'm like, "Nothing. I just did what you said."
Exactly. Can't play games. Can't play games.
uh,
But like you mentioned, like at the end of the day, it all comes down to our Blackness, and like Blackness is defined by each person differently, and all versions of Blackness are valid and should be accepted,
yeah,
and whether or not you accept it or other people accept it is none of their business, because
exactly.
as long as you accept it for yourself, that's all that matters. So speaking of race, and we're going to get deeper into race, I know that like that's something that you've always been interested in, and some of the work that you've been doing. But previously, I had a friend that was from Nigeria, and she talked about her experiences as an international student, and we got into a discussion about the division between Black Americans. Specifically African Americans and Africans. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on like on this and why there is tension between the two groups.
Yeah, I think that the assumption that both groups would get along perfectly is like just the beginning of where things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't exactly have like the best understanding of it, but I think especially in a country like America where like Blackness is so prevalent and there's really no room to be anything other than Black. I mean, we had like the rule about how much blood we had, I mean, how much like Black blood people had, and that classified them as Black. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that um both groups like see each other and have expectations and assumptions, and then like they fall flat because like either group doesn't know that much about the other. So I don't know, I have heard a lot of like complaints from my family when they've like I guess talked to communicated with Black people, and they'll just say like not the greatest of things, and I'm like, well, yeah, they could have been rude, but like, are you mad at them because they're acting very American to you, or are you mad at them because they didn't do what you think other Black people who look like you would do? So like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's a lot of like assumptions and then people being wrong and then just lack of knowledge, because I think it's easily portrayed as like African Americans not knowing a lot about Africans and like not needing to know their history and roots and whatever. But I would say the same is applies to Africans and African Americans, because a lot of Africans don't really know what African Americans have experienced in this country for like hundreds of years, and not seeing that group of people as having their own culture and as having all of these things that they've created in their time being here means that like you don't really see them as like a group of people similar to yours.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that like everyone kind of like, I don't know, likes to be boastful almost. And I think that especially with a lot of Africans who, if you ask anyone, they'll tell you that their country's the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that paired with a bit of anti-Blackness, a bit of just like ignorance, makes it really easy for both groups to be upset at each other. And I've always found it annoying because I think I can easily go between both groups
Mm-hmm.
and like it's completely fine for me. So I like feel hurt when I hear both, because I'm like, I don't get it. There's
Mm-hmm.
actually nothing wrong with that. Or I'm like, there's actually a lot of similarities between the things you're fighting about, just like
It's like you're
you're
all fighting the same thing.
you're being difficult. And I just feel like both groups are very harsh and critical of the other group, because I think like the privilege of being an American means that like when you encounter other Africans that aren't in the same, I don't know, class as you can look down on them, and if you don't acknowledge that feeling in you, then you're not going to understand, like you're not going to be able to have a really important and enlightening conversation about where you went wrong, where you could go better, because you're just stuck in this like really silly assumption that like this person's not as good as you.
Mm-hmm. It's like sometimes it feels like we're all competing for like, it goes back to like white supremacy and then again, like anti-Blackness. Like we're all competing to be like the number one Black group in the eyes of white supremacy sometimes. And instead of working together to fight against white supremacy, it's almost like, no, like you said, like I'm better than you. So let me like
Try to one up you.
one up you. There's like a stubbornness sometimes with like, why don't we communicate and like
Yeah.
actually get to know one another, like any relationship,
Yeah.
so that we can unify and work together, because we're all sort of fighting the same oppressor in
Yes.
different types of ways. Because in Africa, it's more of like the effects of colonization, and like again, in imperialism and all that stuff. While in America, it's mainly slavery that we're still working towards, but it's all oppression.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't matter what type of oppression. It's not the oppression Olympics. Like,
Exactly. Like we've all had it bad. And I think that like that's another part that like would be really helpful in this is if we understood like the timeline of things that have happened in like I don't know the last 200 years, because then you would recognize that like pretty much the 20th century was full of Black people globally struggling against their colonizers and trying to make change for themselves. And then if you go even further than that, you'll look at a lot of the things that have happened in America with enslaved people and just how much changed then. So I just think that if we could all see those histories and not view it from the like perspective of like if it was me I would have done better, or like how could you ever let that happen to you, because like I've heard that about people being like how were so many Africans able to be colonized, and I was like,
or
that's
like,
so rude.
it's very much like the Kanye, like slavery was a choice kind of thing. It's like, that's not how slavery works. And then like, I've seen also in terms of like, at least on the West Coast, because a lot of African Americans, like, or the enslaved people that ended up in America were mainly on the West Coast. And so there's like this fight of like, how could you do that to us? But it's like
Yeah.
more complicated than just being like, hey, here's a group of people, like do with them what you will. Like it's and like you said, just there's a lack of education on both sides. And I think white supremacy is a lot to blame for that in how they portray both sides in the history books and on TV and media, so that when we look at each other, we don't recognize each other.
Yeah, I feel like it's so complicated. And then we're just like dealing with the issue of like a whole continent full of people against a small percentage of people in another country that are having to be kind of the face of America as well.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of Africans see African Americans as like the American, like these are how all Americans are, like, but that's not true. Like, I don't think I would want to associate with the oppressors in this country personally.
No,
not,
no.
not like that. They live in a different world.
And like for me, also personally being from the Caribbean, sometimes it feels like we're left out of the conversation. It's like Africans and African Americans are fighting, and then you have the like Black
Yeah.
Caribbeans and Afro Latinos that are like, yo, we were here too. Like we're everywhere. Like and again, I guess it stems like Blackness is defined
And so
everywhere.
yeah, I even had to come to my own understanding of Blackness when I was little, because when I came here, I didn't know that I was Black, and everyone around me was informing me of this thing that I should have known about myself, but I didn't. And so like with that, I was like, well, what does it mean? And like that helped complicate how I saw myself, because I was like, there's a lot of contrasting definitions of Blackness here. So like, which one is it?
Which one is it? Which one's right? Who decided this was a thing? But like, yeah, you came from a country where everyone's Black and you're just forced to like know what that is.
Yeah, I have had quite the racial surprises growing up. Like, one, realizing that I was Black, and then like two, me leaving my elementary school and going to middle school, and really honestly leaving my home area and like realizing that a majority of people are white. I was like, who would have known? Because my middle school, elementary school, and high school did not look like that. So I've realized a lot of things. I think I'm realizing them now, because I just realized that my city is pretty white. I didn't know that before.
That happens. And also, like, that's you've had lots of culture shocks, pretty much.
Yep.
Just like little culture shocks
All the time, honestly. I think everyone's kind of sick of all my culture shocks, but like it's gonna take me forever to understand what it's like being a 100% American person. Like, I don't know those things.
And that's okay that you don't. Like, it's okay to have those culture shocks, because it's just like, it is what it is.
Yeah, I just think that people like think that you're so rude if you don't know those things. But I'm like, yeah, it might be an assumption with everyone you've ever met, but like, if those people are all from the same place, then yeah, they're not gonna know. Like, I don't know, like greeting your neighbors when they move in. Like, my family's never done that, and I learned about that, and I was like, why would you like go over to your neighbor's house and like bring them a cake? Like, who does that?
My family doesn't do that either, unless they were Haitian. Like, unless my family were like they're really good at like telling who's Haitian. Yeah. And if you're like a Haitian person, or they can assume you that you are, then they'll probably like ask you and greet you. But like, if you're just some random person next door, like if you're outside and they're outside and they say hi, like, they're not gonna be like mean and not say hi, but they're not gonna like bring a cake over next door.
Yeah, just like those little things that like everyone expects, that like they get so upset at you for. And I just wish that they knew that it's like, I never learned that. Like, I don't know what people do for like birthdays sometimes. So just like in general, I think I have a lot of culture shocks, and I'm kind of getting sick of them. I would call myself an experienced American, but I guess not.
Guess not sometimes to some people.
I'm the experienced American in my family. They call me for all American things.
That's how you know. That's how you know. Whoever gets asked to do paperwork, to call someone, to translate, is the like you said, the experienced American.
And I'm also the oldest daughter, so
Abby, I think we're like twin souls or something, because I'm also the oldest.
We could do a podcast episode on the burden of being the oldest child.
Like, the oldest daughter.
I learned way too much at a young age.
And did too much too. My mom's gonna be like, because she listens to every episode, she's gonna be like, excuse me? Like,
I know, but
it's like, true.
I think that like families don't realize all the things that they put their oldest daughter through, because like if they've had children recently, or they've had a lot of children after that, they usually like switch it up. But like for the first child, man, you're like the trial, and everything goes wrong.
Everything goes wrong. And then you have to teach the others what not to do, essentially.
And then they're like, no, what do you mean? Why wouldn't my mom take care of it? And I'm like, what? I'm like, what even?
Moving forward, so again, continuing our conversations about race, I've heard that while you were in college, you made a documentary about the Black student experience at your school, and I just thought that was so interesting, because I was like, she made a documentary? Like, that's so cool. Especially like as a college student, when you're like got a million bajillion things on you. I could not. I could never. So I applaud you for that. So what led you to creating this film, and talk a bit more about what the film, like what you discovered through it?
Yeah, so my film is diverse, a Black student experience. I specifically named it a Black student experience because I did not want to define the overall Black experience at university. I just wanted to do like a Black experience. So just the people I had interviewed, and then that moment in time, because the year that I started working on my documentary was the 50th anniversary of the first Black undergrad student coming to my school. And so I think I had like found out that fact like randomly, and I was like, really? And then I had found out like just little bits of information from like people that I knew. Like I think there was like a class where people were going through archives, and so I would hear some stuff about that, and I think they also might have had a podcast, so they were like talking about it there. And so essentially I just like started like hearing all this information and like writing it down for myself. And this was junior year, and I was like, what do I want to do like before I leave college? And at that time, like I pretty much knew how my senior year was going to be, just had to finish up my 2 majors. And I was like, I don't think that this is it. And especially with the career choice I decided on after college, like I was like, I don't think I'm going to get the opportunity to do this again. So I brought it up to my advisor / professor at the end of that semester, and he was like, yeah, you should do it. He's essentially just saying like, you'd be the perfect person to do it, and I support you. And I was like, okay, well, where do I go from here? And so then I like did all the like other stuff, such as I guess like writing it down, because I was going to use the time that I had free in my schedule to work on my documentary. So I had to take like a half study, something like that.
Yeah, like the 1 credit, like.
Yes, one of those. And so I chose one of the professors from the journalism department, who actually was my journalism professor when I took documentary journalism my sophomore year. So that's where I had first learned about documentaries. So when I thought of this idea, I was like, yeah, a documentary would be the best way to go for this. And so they all said yes, because they have entirely too much faith in me. I spent that summer when I wasn't in my internship, like collecting that information, just saving it, because I knew that when I started the next semester, I'd have to hit the ground running with this documentary. So I think that it was a really difficult experience, because I had to essentially give up my senior year in order to work on my documentary, because I filmed it, edited it myself, and then also like had to promote it and do all the interviews. So it was a lot, but I was luckily able to get a few other students who were taking documentary journalism at the time to support me with it. But it was definitely like all on me. But I just felt like it was a story that had to be told, and I thought that the formats in which it was being told were in like bits and pieces. And so I wanted to bring all of that together, because I really appreciated all of the work that the people looking through the archives were doing. And then we had a race and racism like project. So I got a lot of support from that, because that's where a majority of my background information came from. And then Irina, best person ever, like supported me in like actually making this an event and making it like known to the community. So that was really helpful. And I think that I had such a wonderful experience just like doing the documentary by myself, that like by the time it was finished, I was like, what? I was so overwhelmed, especially after spending every single weekend and most nights editing until like 3 a.m. While studying for finals. And
And you did it in a
process.
year, basically.
Yeah. I doing it in a year was a lot.
I was like, what's like the average documentary? I feel like it takes like forever.
Yes, it takes years.
Yeah.
To do a documentary that's like 2 hours long. And so when I was originally doing this, I was talking to my professor, and he's like, what length do you think? And I was like, I don't know, 40 minutes. And he was like, you can't do that in 1 year. And I was like, well, okay then. I was like 30, and he's like, no. And I was like, okay, I guess 15 to 20. And he's like, yep, that's perfect. Like, how do I fit all of this in 15 to 20 minutes? But that's where my journalism experience kicked in, and I decided to compile a lot of information together. So I feel like I haven't even said what the documentary was really about, but it chronicles the 50 years since the first person started at the University of Richmond to right now. So I interviewed the first three. I talked to the first three people who were the first students.
Mm-hmm.
It was Barry Green. He's like the official first student that everyone like calls as that. But I also interviewed others and like really learned about how different the university was in that time, and like how many rules they had and all the difficulties they had. And then I was able to find more alum from like different years and then get their story. And then I talked to people in my year or younger than me, just anyone who was at the university at the time, and included them in, and then tried to make those connections between the past 50 years and what the Black student experience has been like. And, you know, it was difficult for just about everyone. There was a lot of adversity that everyone had to face. But when you see that we started off with 3 and you look at where we are now, you see that there's a lot of growth. But I think one of the most like obvious things of the film is that you see how little there is, because I have one shot that is in our stadium, like the football stadium, and I have people sitting in a small part of it to reflect the small percentage of students at our school who are Black. And it's like really sad because like you can barely see their faces, but that's the truth for a lot of PWIs across the country, where the Black student population is so small. But all of them have been doing like monumental things in the past few years to make their voice known, to advocate for change or whatever. And so I think in my documentary, you really see that UR has a long way to go, and any claims of diversity and progress aren't as true as they seem, because when you put a magnifying glass up to it, you see that all of the heroes and people we talk about, like even the guy who's like who became an astronaut from UR, like he was dealing with racism at the same time. And so no one was shielded from that while being on campus. So I think that the documentary really shows that, but it is 15 to 20 minutes. So I tell everyone that it's not the full story. It's just pieces of it that hopefully make you understand that this is a problem that continues on and has not been like eradicated, and that there's a lot of history that we all need to reconcile with. And I think that that's something I was really wanting to be like a result of the film, because I think the University of Richmond's history with Black people, enslaved people, with pretty much anyone who's not white, cisgender, that like they've done a lot against. And I think everyone deserves to have those conversations before we continue praising ourselves for being diverse and having lots of international students and whatnot.
Yeah, I've always going to 2 PWIs. And if you don't know what those are, that's predominantly white institutions. Like I always found it like baffling. Like I was like they had the audacity to be like, we're so diverse. Like this class is the most diverse class. Like when I was at Lehigh, my first year, we were the most diverse class. And then every year after that was the most diverse class. And I think once someone wrote down like how many like Black people were actually in their class, and they were like, there's like 15 of us. Like, and granted, like they only wrote down Black students. They didn't write down Latinx students and other like groups of color. But like Black students, including the international Black students, they're like, there's like 15, 20 of us at most, like, and we're yet the most diverse class. And it all made us think like, did they just add like one more person each year? But yeah, like I think this goes across the board at PWIs in general, no matter where, like, again, like Virginia's in the South, Lehigh's in Pennsylvania, which is in the North. And there's this idea of like, oh, it's really bad in the South, but like the North is okay. And it's like, no, they're all racist. Like,
Yes.
it just is what it is. And like, I'm sure even through your documentary, like, I hope I can watch it. I don't know
Yes,
where I can
I'll
find
send
it.
you the link.
Yes, please do. I'm sure like even through that, I'll be able to be like, yep, that I see that. I'm like, yep, I understand that.
Yes. There were so many like surprising things that I realized throughout the like interview process that didn't even make it in. Like there's so much like B-roll and interview stuff that I didn't get to include. But like how Black people weren't allowed to sit in the dining hall for like a really long time. Black people weren't allowed to be on campus. Like there were whole like posters and flyers that said Black people could not be at this event. We had minstrel shows for a really long time, and you see those through the yearbooks, and it's just a lot. I also just thought something that was interesting was that when I was interviewing the Black alum, they were like essentially saying that me and my classmates all had it really good because of how many of us there were, like how much the school is supporting us. And I don't think I would have described my experience as being fully supported as a Black woman in college. So I was just like, it's crazy that they think that. But when you are one of 7, when you're one of 3, like, you know the treatment that you're getting, and you know that that treatment is personal. But I still feel that students even today would say that they have experienced that because racism is pervasive as hell. And it just pops up in so many ways. Like I spent a majority of my time being the only Black woman in a lot of my classes, and I was like I would go to eat and I'd be the only Black person. I would just do so many activities and I couldn't see someone else like me. So I found that to be so frustrating because, you know, people treat you different.
Yeah.
You think like it's sad that I can say that I knew every Black person at my college when I was there. But I think that the diversity of everyone there is just so wonderful, and that it hurts me that the school doesn't truly recognize that because they see us all as Black students with their assumptions that so many of us are poor or it's not great, or that we're, I don't know, affirmative action decisions because of just our existence on campus. I learned so much, and it didn't make me feel great.
No.
I asked a lot, like, how did you deal with all that information? And I was like, well, I put my journalism hat on and I said, well, keep reading.
I think that's amazing that you did that. And I think one of the things that amazes me about Black students, especially at PWIs, is that we create our own support and our own communities. And a lot of times that's not fostered by the university. It's just like, we all just like, okay, where we at? Where we at? Like, and we just all come together. And we're not afraid to like speak up and speak out about issues that are happening on and off campus. No matter what retaliation that we get back, we're just like, okay, and we're going to come back stronger. So that's the one thing I've always appreciated, like even through the struggle, which sucks and should not be the case, like we still manage to have community and a voice.
I feel like the one thing I would say about Black people across the world is that we're also resilient. And that's not to say that we've dealt with the oppression well, but the fact that I see so many students very young, like advocating and pushing for change. Like I love that we're all building upon each other's work and continuing. As I think that my documentary could have been taken another step further, and I wish I could have, where I focused on the experience of LGBTQ youth of color at campus, because that is different too. Like they're making space for themselves in those intersections. of different identities are important to look at as well. And I just think that, I know we've got a long way to go, but I hope that we all appreciate just how much we've done.
Yeah, I agree. Snap, snap, snaps all the way. And then before like my last question, why do you think it is important to have these conversations about race and culture like we've had today?
Yeah, I think that these conversations can serve many purposes. And oftentimes it's seen that talking about these things is to make someone feel bad or is to make white people understand what their ancestors have done. But it's so much more than that. These conversations can help me and you have a better understanding of what our lives are like. And I
Mm-hmm.
think someone else might think that, oh, we already know what's up. If someone saw us in public together, they'd be like, oh, they're probably sisters or
They
something.
probably would, or cousins or something.
I know. But I think conversations like these are so enlightening, and I never get sick of them because I think there's no limit to how much knowledge I can take in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I really think that it helps to humanize us, and that we spend so much of our time taking away other people's humanity
Mm-hmm.
that we can't really get anywhere if we don't remind ourselves of that. So I think when we're talking about policies, when we're talking about change, when we're talking about just anything that involves people, I think we need to be reminded that these are actually people and not just like a number, a stat, or just like a movable pin that you can,
Mm-hmm.
fix. And so I think they serve the purpose of that in making us better. I think they can be healing. I find that
Yeah.
conversations like this with other Black women are so healing to me because I see that we're the same, like with all the differences between us, we're the same, and we deserve the same things. We deserve, love, nurture, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I really love talking to other Black women about these things because the Black experience is endless. So I want to know about it as much as possible. And then I also think that these conversations can be changed. I don't think that they are the end. I don't think having a talk like this is the end,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that talks like these really stick in people's minds. It sticks a lot more than I don't know, a seminar, a presentation, a document, but like
Yeah.
talking to someone and hearing what they have to say helps a lot in remembering that these are people and caring for them if you encounter this group of people again.
Mm-hmm. I like that you said also that like it's not always about white people that
Yeah,
these conversations are for. Like,
I think everything is about white people too much, and I'm sick of that. You don't need to be talking about race every time in like a circle with other white people and be like, oh, did you know you have more privilege than these people? And
mm-hmm.
you know that you saying this hurt their feelings. I'm like, okay. And
Like,
we're not even getting into deep conversations like we're having because people are entirely too comfortable to ever get there. So what's the point, I say?
preach, preach, preach. And for me, like, I started this podcast not to cater to that. It was more like allowing people to share their stories, like people that we don't hear about all the time. And like that's what this is about. It's like it has nothing to do about like if you learn something, great.
Mhm.
And obviously like there is teaching moments like in everything. But like really it's like, okay, who are you? Why are you the way that you are? And then, add a little bit of fun in that too. Like it's not the full story, but it's like a little bit of the story that someone could also be like, okay, like that person that I'm hearing sounds like me, has had a similar experience, and I feel in a better place to accept who I am because I heard their story.
Yeah, definitely. I think I love your podcasts and other forms of media slash like content that do this because I think it's too easy to pick up those like, I don't know, like those success stories, those beautiful stories. But for a majority of people, our lives aren't perfect.
Mm-mm.
And it's just hearing things like this that I think can be so helpful to others in, in all the things that you were saying, but also in just like ruining expectations. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
everything you thought about this group of people isn't true. And everything you've heard about me in this podcast doesn't describe all the people who are like me. Just, I think it can be helpful. It can be a
Yeah.
nice stepping stone to being woke, as the youth say.
Even though that's being overused now,
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, like
Gosh, I could write a paper about how I hate that word. That and canceled. Gosh, I hate
oh,
this.
cancel culture is like the worst too. It's just like
I'm like, does it really apply in this
no,
situation?
also it never works. Like it literally never works.
Yeah. And it never works because there's never any accountability. Like, I feel like being canceled is
They
like
just like
it's being put in timeout.
exactly. It's just like they hide for a bit and they like slowly worm their way back in, and it's like, oh, they never left.
Yes. I feel like cancel culture these days isn't even about like trying to heal the people who were hurt or
No.
fixing any problems. It's really just calling someone out for being racist, homophobic, etc. And then them being like, wow, I can't believe you found out. I've been hiding like this for 20 years. And I'm like,
I always found that baffling. Just like, wow, like I never thought about blah blah blah. Like this is such a it's always like it's never, yeah, like you said, it's never about the people that were hurt. It's always about the
yes,
person that hurt the other person.
yes. I always like ask myself, like, oh, like why did it take this person, like, I don't know, saying the N-word on public TV to like get them canceled? Because I think that says very little about them. It says more so about everyone else around them, because it's not like this started today. It's been happening for years, and all of you have been saying okay to their behaviors. So let's talk about that. Because they're going to keep doing what they've been doing.
Yep.
The only way to change is to look at the people, to work on the people, not the person who like Papa John, like him. Like, I
What
don't
about his staff that listen or his people or whatever?
exactly.
Yeah. And then my last question before we get into the speed round is what do you love most, I guess, about yourself? You know, you're Black woman from Kenya, grew up in the United States, and I know you don't like your labels, and you are who you are. You're both in everything and nothing at once, pretty much. But like, what do you love the most about yourself?
I think that while I've always had a hard time like associating labels with myself, because I think they're, annoying and whatever. I do think that something I like about myself is that I think I've been really true to myself for my entire life, and that like I know what I know. I know that doesn't like make any sense, but like I trust myself fully, and I feel like in all of my experiences, I very much so see the same Abby, just, Abby with a better dictionary of words. So I think that that's what I like, because I have the issue of being one of those people who thinks that they're really right all the time, but like also just like reflecting a lot. So I think I reflect on everything I do. And while that could be annoying, I think that it is a good part of me, because I'm constantly trying to do better, and look at my worldview differently, see if there's changes that can be made, or if there's things that can be like added, or taken away.
I love that. I love that. That's you. That's amazing. Keep
Yes.
doing you. Keep being you.
Thanks, girl.
Of course. And I think you just inspire me to do the same for myself, pretty much.
Oh, yes, do it.
And everyone else, be you. There's no
With
time to waste.
some therapy, you can do anything. Therapy and confidence.
That's
You can
it.
rule the world with that.
Especially Black women, just like
Yes.
that's all we need, and we good to go. There's no
Yes.
stopping us.
You can't stop a confident Black woman. They're gonna get what they want and they're gonna do what they want.
Mm-hmm. And that's on period. That's it. That's it. But yeah, that's the end of all the serious talk. Now we're going to get into the speed round. Basically, I'm going to ask you some questions, not a lot, a few questions about like just trying to get to know you better. Try not to think too hard about it. Just like
I'll try.
just do what you got to do.
Okay.
Some of these I just came up with on the spot hearing you speak that I'm like, oh, I want to know. So, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So, first question. I heard you were a foodie and that you run a food Instagram.
Yes.
So, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but like, what is like one of your favorite meals that you've had since like starting your foodstagram?
Oh gosh, I've had so many wonderful meals. It's really hard to think of a favorite, but I would say that the experience I had at Green Eggs the first time was transformative. Because I think Green Eggs Cafe is the best place in the world. And if you haven't been, there's multiple locations throughout Philly. I've been to a majority of them at this point, and they're all great. And so I think the French toast would be great. It was like creme brulee French toast with like thick layers of, I think, challah bread, but it could have been brioche. And then it had like the beautiful creme brulee sauce and fresh berries on top. Oh gosh. Oh,
You
that
said
was,
creme brulee, and I was like, sold.
I'm a
Sold.
I'm a breakfast person, and that really rocked my world. It was so good.
Okay, so green egg. Next time I
Yes.
go to Philly, I'll have to try
Yes.
it.
Green eggs is the best.
Nice. And next question. You're a journalism major,
Yep.
so I'm sure you read a lot.
Yes.
So what are you reading right now?
I'm currently reading Pleasure Activism. Casey actually bought me that book for my birthday.
Look at Casey.
And yes, I love this book. It's really been, I think, the like theme of my life recently, where I've been really working on how to take care of myself, that, you know, self-care, self-love, in a very radical way, where it's not just about like just looking for the feelings of feeling good, but more so being intentional with it. And so this book's been a lot. It's going to take me forever to read though, because there's just so many things that I like re-examine my life because I just read it and I'm like, oh God, Abby, why were you doing that? Like, I don't know. For example, something that I think is in this book, and I've heard a lot before, is that we are very quick to deny ourselves pleasure, in that like we don't let ourselves just enjoy things because we're so worried about, you know, lacking this thing not being there anymore, or just generally thinking that we don't deserve it. And so that's something that I've been really trying to work on, and treating myself right. You know, like if there's a candle that I really like and I bought and it's super expensive, like why would I not burn it? There's no reason for me to try to keep it there and not experience it. Like I deserve that experience of turning that candle on and having that moment to myself.
I love that. It's like you don't have to be struggling all the time. Like
Exactly.
you can enjoy life too. And you can enjoy life right now. You don't have to wait
Exactly.
for a certain time. I think a lot of times as young people, we think like, or we've been taught that like you enjoy life when you make a certain amount of money or something. And it's like, if you have that mind frame, a lot of times, like you were saying, like you're thinking from a place of lacking. So like once you hit it and then you're like, well, then I want the next level and then I want the next, and then life goes by and you retire and then you're like, oh, I guess I can enjoy life now. And it's like, no.
Yes. And I think that it can also be so healing. That's one part that I've been enjoying my little radical self-care experience, is that I think about how my ancestors didn't have the time to rest like I do now. And I'm spending so much time on like frivolous things, based on our world today. And that like something really healing I can do for my body, and, you know, working on the massive like box that is intergenerational trauma. I think that's like some good healing work to do, is to really like allow ourselves to feel that pleasure, because it's taken a lot. It's taken a village and more to get us to where we're at. And I know that very much so, because I think of my family, see them, and I've literally heard stories about how they've done that and how they've done it for me.
Yeah. All right. Next question. This is more fun. So, favorite childhood TV show?
Ooh, favorite childhood TV show. That's like really hard, because I feel like there's really like shows that I could watch all day, but then there's also like shows that I think are so important to me. But I think I'm gonna go for the former, and I'm gonna choose Powerpuff Girls.
Ooh.
That was my favorite show, and I remember even at like the Scholastic like winter book fair, there was like this, Powerpuff Girls like art set being sold, and I like begged my mother for it, and then got it. I was like, this is the most precious thing I've ever owned. It was like my favorite Christmas gift for like ever.
That's amazing. I feel like that's such a, like, I wouldn't expect someone to say Powerpuff Girls, but that's, even though it's a great show, it was a great show.
I feel like it gets slept on just
It
because
does.
it's a while, but when you go back, like, it's a funny show.
I respect it. I respect it. I had a dog or cat person question, but you're both. So that's great to know. And then last one, if you could choose a superpower, what would it be?
I think my superpower would be to be invisible. And I feel like there's no reason for it besides that I think my mental health could really benefit from being invisible when I want. Like, I don't know, when I'm embarrassed or something. I just want to like, I don't want to be perceived. I don't know. I know that doesn't make any sense, but like, I hate being perceived. And
I get it.
Yeah, I feel like
Are you more introverted?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like a lot of like introverts, that's like what they like I'll be there, but I don't want you to like actually know that I'm there.
Yeah, like I feel like when I'm in a group of friends, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good time. And then when I speak and everyone looks at me, I'm like, how can you do that?
Why are you looking at me?
Yeah, I know. And I just really hate to be perceived. I'm not sure how I manage to be a social media manager every day, but I do it. And I try not to be perceived at all personally.
I love that.
The work I'm doing is focus.
That's so funny. I love that. That's so great to know. But that's it for the speed round. And then just last sort of thing for the audience is, how can people reach you if they want to follow you?
Yes. Funny question to answer when I just said I didn't want to be perceived. And my first thought when you said that, I was like, oh God, I'm gonna get followers. But you can follow me on Instagram at Abby Prime. That's ABBYPRIME. I think I'm that on like a lot of platforms like Twitter, probably like Pinterest or something. And then my foodstagram is macarons and matcha, like no ampersand, just and written out. And then I guess I could send you the link to my diverse interview and you can find me there.
Yeah, and I'll put all of your information in the episode notes so that they can check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for coming on. It's great meeting you for the first time. It's like we meet each other and we have this really deep conversation about Blackness and all the other things. But I hope we can meet each other in person one day.
Yes, definitely. I'm so thankful that you invited me onto your podcast. I've never done anything like this before, but I think I could talk all day. Because main character syndrome so great, and I love the work that you do. Thanks. And I love that Casey connected us, because this conversation was so easy. It went by so quickly.
It did. You blink and it's over. I really hope y'all enjoyed that episode. I know I did. I really, really loved getting to know Abby and to hear her story. And one of the things that really struck out with me is our discussion, about identity. And that's sort of like the tie between all those discussions, like how we define our Blackness, how we define who we are, what labels that others have placed on us, and how do we want to identify. And that's sort of my reflection question to y'all is, how do you define yourself? How do you identify yourself? Is that something that you've wrestled with throughout your life? Is that something you've always known? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking about that. I know for me, I relate to Abby in the sense of having these different perspectives growing up, being raised in a Haitian household, but going to school and all people know me or see me as is a Black woman in America. And yeah, so that's something that I've always wrestled with. And I feel like I've really come to terms with as I've gotten older and just, learned more about sort of both sides, learn more about Black America, but also learn about Haitian history as I've gotten older. So I would love to know like what that is, what that's been like for you. So how do you define yourself? How do you identify? But yeah, I really hope y'all enjoyed that episode. Again, let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For links and resources, check out the episode notes. If you liked what you heard, help your girl out by leaving a 5-star rating and a review. For more content and updates, follow the show's Insta at the @Uplift_podcast. And spread the word by telling your friends and sharing on social media. Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. For any questions or business inquiries, you can email me at theupliftpodcast1@gmail.com. This was The Uplift with Dabney Brice. See you next time.